Hello and welcome to On a Grand Scale podcast. This is where real conversations about what it truly takes to scale meaningful work happen. My name is Uno Nyoni and I'm the founder of Grand Scale. We help founder-led organizations to build systems that allow them to grow beyond their founders. We have found that many missions don't stall because of passion or lack of funding. They stall because systems haven't caught up with the vision. So what is this podcast about? This podcast is about leadership, it's about strategy, finance, governance, the hard decisions behind real growth. And today, I'm excited to have Christoph Lorenz joining us on this podcast. Christoph is the CEO of KaneMed Consultants, a leading health and safety consulting firm in South Africa. He leads a business of more than 100 employees, generating over 80 million in annual revenue with approximately 5% of the market share nationally. The company has a 30 plus year legacy, originally founded by his father, Chris Lorenz. And Christoph has taken the business forward into the next phase of growth over the past 13 or so years. As a leader, he is passionate about operational excellence, strong systems, and building empowered teams. His leadership philosophy focuses on getting the right people in the right seats and creating a company that can thrive beyond the founder. Outside of business, Christoph is a husband, a father of five, a passionate cyclist, and an active Christian who seeks to live out his faith in everyday life. He is also a member of the Entrepreneurs Organization and serves as an EOA coach, supporting other entrepreneurs on their leadership journeys. Christoph, it's great to have you with us today on a Grand Scale podcast.
Yeah, thanks, man. Uno, thanks for that introduction. And it's interesting hearing somebody else introduce you. Uh, you sort of forget about all of the various hats that one wears. And
Right.
yeah, it's encouraging to hear. But thanks for having me. It's an honor to be on your podcast.
And thanks for coming. All right, let's get right into it. Um, Take us back to the beginning. Who is Christoph? Before KaneMed, where were you born? What was your upbringing like? And how do you see that upbringing kind of contributing to how you are leading in business today?
I think that's such a powerful question to ask. Um, there's a saying that people say people are an overnight success, or that um, people are just lucky. And there's a famous golf player, Gary Player. He's quoted as saying, the more I practice, the luckier I get." And I think it's
Mm.
important to reflect back on one's journey. So, my upbringing is I got raised in a conservative Christian household,
Hmm.
and we were um, a low to middle income household, so not wealthy by any means. And my father actually lost his employment when I was a baby, or just before I was born.
Mm.
And then he fell in between jobs for some time before he got stable employment with the Department of Labor, which is the enforcement arm of uh, sort of health and safety and what we do. So we now consult in the public sector, and the Department of Labor is sort of the governmental enforcement arm.
Hmm.
But my story goes back to when I was really
Sorry,
young.
before you go there, so what was he doing in the
He was
Department
an
of Labor?
he was an inspector at the Department of Labor,
Ah,
but we'll get to that sort
sure.
of. That's how Kermit got birthed, is
Right,
by him
right.
being the inspector.
Sure.
But my journey for business starts going way back to when I was like 4 or 5 years old. So my mother is a potter. So she
Hmm.
made pottery cups and saucers and basins and things like this. And we always went to markets to go and sell them, like flea markets.
Mm.
And one of my earliest childhood memories is going to this flea market with my mother. So at the age of 4, I was at a flea market, and my mother wrote her cell number with a permanent marker on the inside of my arm, and I just wandered through the market as a 4-year-old. So she's selling pottery to sustain the family, and I'm wandering the flea market, and I'm observing how people do business and how people transact. Then that moved to me actually manning the stall with her when I was 6.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time I was 10, I manned the stall on my own. And then
Jeez.
from high school, every December, so for the entire December and half of January, we would go and she would man the store at the KKK, the Klein Karoo Nasionale Kunstefees, and I would man the stall at Hartenbos's flea market um, as a high school person. So I got raised in business, and selling stuff has always been part of my life. So
Mm.
I believe as a business owner, selling is a skill set that a person has to have.
Right.
So that part of my upbringing, the part that taught me how to sell, how to deal with people, how to
Mm.
um, solve problems. I think that
Mm.
is sort of the biggest part of my upbringing that has shaped who I am as a businessman today.
Okay. So you start selling at the market. In fact, you start observing your mom doing the selling. And I think that's a very important point because people learn through observing more than anything else.
Hmm.
And then you get introduced into the business as you start manning the 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 stall at the market. And after high school, literally you are on a job of some sort with um, selling as your number one thing to do.
So, not after school, like high school, I started manning the stalls on my own. Then after school, I went to go study. I studied a diploma in building science, and then I went to go work for a contractor so that I understand how the building industry works. And then I went to go work for my father's business, Kernmead.
Okay. Yeah.
So my father started the business stepping out of the
Sorry,
Department of Labor.
just
Yes.
before that, what informed the choice of this diploma? What were you thinking at the time? What did you want to do?
So the plan was to go into my father's business
Okay.
from the beginning, but health and safety as a discipline, a lot of people practice it very theoretically. In other words, this is what the book says, and you then have to just obey the letter of the law. Our
Oh,
approach has always been to make safety practical. Or to word it differently, it's very difficult to tell a person how to work safely if you don't know how to do the work yourself. So
right, right.
I went and did the construction work myself for 3 years or two
Mm-hmm.
years, and then I only
Mm-hmm.
started in my father's business.
Okay, so let's go to your father then. The first part of it, you told us that he was in between jobs, had lost his employment, and then he went to work in the Department of Labor. What happened to him, and how was Cain made born?
So he started Kernmead uh, back in 2004. And there were new construction regulations promulgated in 2003, towards the end of
Mm,
2003.
mm,
And because he was in the department, he saw these regulations coming. And it was the first
mm,
time when health and safety was mandated by a legislative piece of legislation that clients or owners of buildings have to have a person representing them dealing with safety matters. So he saw this piece
mm.
of legislation coming. And at the age of 50, can you believe it? So maybe that's a word for somebody listening to the podcast who
Right,
thinks it's too late
right.
for them to start a business. At the
Mm.
age of 50, he resigned his permanent work and he started building on this dream that he had, this dream to make an impact in the industry and to have people be safer because of it. So he started the
Mm.
business in 2004.
Mm-hmm.
He then ran it for, let's say, about 10 years to
Mm-hmm.
2014, 2015. And then
Mm.
2015, that's when I took it over from him.
Okay. Okay. So he sees a new regulation coming, and the new regulation states that you need to have a representative if you are in this industry and you're doing this type of work. And thinks, I am the representative who is best placed to help many companies. And that's how the consultancy company starts. And you
Exactly.
join him in which year of the business?
So in, let's say, 2012, I joined
Uh-huh.
him. So the business
Okay.
was um, like 8, 9 years old.
Right, right. So you only had 3 years between the time that you got in and then how you took over the business. How tell
Yeah.
us about that journey.
So that was a very sad and almost traumatic part of the
Mm,
journey. So
mm,
my dad fell out of a tree and broke his lower back and ended up in a wheelchair in about 2013, I think, towards the end of 2013. So
mm-hmm.
I was with him for about a year or two. Then he fell, he broke his back, and
Oh,
um, he he then continued for about a year in the
mm,
business. But we very quickly realized that the stress of running and building this business isn't
I was
good
getting to him.
for his health and for
Mm,
where he was in his journey with
mm,
being a paraplegic and
mm,
medication he's taking. So we then took a family decision
mm,
that he'll step out and I'll
mm,
step in and run the business. So I was
mm.
very young at that stage. I was like, I'm 36 now, which is probably also still very young. But when I took
You don't say.
when I took over the business, which is like, let's say 11 years ago now, I was like 25. So I was pretty much a
Right.
kid. And then
Sure.
I had to take charge of this organization and lead it. So it was a very daunting and scary um, place
I
to
can
be.
imagine. I can imagine. And take us into onto that stage. How big is the business then? How many people? And what were your first steps? How did you navigate that first year of you taking over the business?
So the business then also felt huge, but realistically, it was a lot smaller than it is now. So
Mm-hmm.
we were about, let's say, 9 employees,
Mm-hmm.
myself and my dad included.
Mm-hmm.
And the first couple of things that I did when I took over from him is I got control of our finances.
Mm-hmm.
So our finances weren't actively managed. My dad is a
Mm.
very technical, practical guy, and he
Right.
let
Right.
the financial people to do the financial numbers. But
Mm.
I'm a firm believer that the owner of the business should
Is the
know what
financial leader.
know what's happening in the numbers. So
Mm.
I have financial people that's a lot smarter than me that work with
Mm.
me.
Mm.
And I often have to tell them, listen, I'm the slow kid in the class. So just
Mm.
explain that in English and not in accounting terms. But
Mm.
I know what is happening in my numbers. And I know
Mm.
I feel business is like a big machine that if you
Mm.
pull levers, certain things happen. If I pull this lever, then
Mm.
that happens. If I pull that lever, then this happens. And
Mm.
finance is one of those levers. You need to know if I increase my prices, that's what happens. If I decrease my prices, that's what happens. If I increase my
Mm.
salaries, that's what happens. If I collect
Mm.
my debtors quicker, that's what happens. So
Mm.
that was the first thing that I did is I got control of the finances.
Mm.
Or maybe the second thing. The first thing that I did was there was a guy who worked with my dad. He's still my business partner and fellow
Mm-hmm.
shareholder today.
Mm-hmm.
And he worked with my dad for like 10 years,
Mm,
um, or maybe not that long, but like a long time before I even came into the picture. So
mm-hmm.
he knew the business really well, and he was really passionate about the technical aspects of the business.
Mm,
Legislation, what does the law say? How do we interpret,
mm,
which is
mm.
a core part of our business, but it's not something that I'm
Absolutely.
passionate about. So
Mm,
I then asked him, does he want to run this business with me? He said
mm,
yes. I gave him some shares. I made him a director in the business, and he then
mm,
became my business partner. So that
mm,
was the first thing. There's an
mm,
African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. So from day
mm.
one, I made a decision that I want to go far instead of
Right,
far.
right, right. So you take a partner who has experience, who's worked with the business for with your dad for more than 10 years, and then you also get hold of finances. Okay, two things I want to ask. Let's start with the finance side. You have a diploma in the construction side of things. And then you have finance people taking hold of the finances and all of that stuff. I have worked with you as a coachee, and I have seen the kind of knowledge you have of numbers. How did you get that skill set over this time? What is it that so you there's it's one thing to get hold of a spreadsheet and say, okay, so what's happening in my numbers? But to have the language, to know those levers, what to do with them as you move, still sounds like something that would take some time. What did you do to educate yourself in that area?
I wish there was a sophisticated answer that I can give you, but
Mm,
there isn't.
mm,
But the reality is, being willing to look stupid
mm.
enables you to be smart in the long term. So, what I mean by that is very often people sit in reporting meetings, they have documents sent to them, and they don't understand them. They don't understand the language that's used. It
Mm,
doesn't make sense to them.
mm,
They can't internalize it.
mm.
But because we want to give an
Look
outward
smart.
appearance of being
Mm,
in control, we don't say we don't understand. And I just from
mm,
day one said, that's not what I want to do. So if somebody explained something to me and I didn't understand it, I said, I still don't understand it. You must explain it again.
mm,
What does that number
mm,
mean? Why did that change?
mm, mm,
Explain this to me.
mm,
And I still do that today. And it's frustrating for my team because they feel I should know,
mm.
but I don't know. But the interesting fact that I've noticed is very often the stuff that doesn't make sense to me or the stuff that I don't understand doesn't make sense to, or other people also don't understand. So if I start
Right.
asking the financial people, I don't understand why are we paying so much tax on that item?
Right. Right.
Then they just say, no, but it's the tax code. I'm like, yeah, but I understand, but cite the code for me because last time we didn't pay so much.
Yeah.
What do
Yeah.
you mean? And then they cross check and they're like, oh, we didn't pay so much.
Yeah.
So I remember the numbers and I just ask the difficult questions. And
Sure.
by difficult, I don't mean I'm trying to catch people out. I just
Yeah.
legitimately ask until I
Just want to
understand.
understand.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And then to the other part of you taking on a business partner who's experienced and who is interested in the technical part. You know, people always come back and say partnerships are difficult. What has been your journey and lessons around taking on business partners and working with partnerships that help you scale?
Um, as you said in your intro, I am a born again, spirit filled believer, and
Mm,
that forms a big part of my decision making framework.
mm.
So, there's a passage in scripture that I love in the book of Amos 3, verse 3, and it says, and how can two walk together unless they
Unless they
agree?
agree. Mm,
So agreement is a big um, test for me in how do I walk with partners is,
Mm.
do we agree on why we're in business? Do we agree on what the outcome is that we want? Um, do we agree on the frequency of reporting? Do we agree?
Mm.
So agreement is a big test for me because business is hard, and if the partnership is hard as well, in other words, we have to work at finding each other, then it's going to be a draining partnership. So I
Right.
choose partners that are like-minded to me, that we
Mm.
find agreement on things quite quickly.
Mm.
So that's my litmus test for partnership.
Okay. Okay. So 9, 10 employees as you take on, now you're on 100. What's the journey that takes place in the past 10 or so years that has seen the 10xing of the business?
That is a very difficult question to answer. I don't know how long is a
In fact, no, let's just take the journey as it goes. I did this as we were starting to, and then this happened, and we'll learn as the story goes.
um. So I think the most important place to start is the fact that I believe that I'm called to do what I do. I don't
Sure.
believe that I'm here by accident.
Mm,
And what I feel called to do primarily is to
mm,
provide a place where employees can come find safety and purpose in their daily life. I
mm,
think work is a deeply sacred spiritual thing to God. If you just think about it, if you were God and you can introduce yourself to mankind in any way, you have a blank page and you can do whatever you want, how would you introduce yourself to mankind? Think of conversations that you have with people. The first time you meet somebody, you introduce yourself in a certain way to set the scene. You introduced me today. This is
mhm,
Christoph. He's a business owner, 80
mm,
million revenue, 100
mm,
employees, to
mm,
set the tone for what can be expected from the conversation.
mm,
I find it fascinating that God chooses to introduce himself as a working God.
mm,
That's the first version of God that we see.
mm.
He's a God who worked for 6 days. And then he says, I'll make man in my image. And what image is that? In this working image that I just portrayed. So I
Okay.
think there's a deep spiritual connection and purpose for us in our work. God took
Mm,
chaos and he turned it into order. And then he looked
mm,
back and he said, it is good. And we get to
mm,
do that. We get to take
mm,
something that is chaotic, be it an Excel
mm,
spreadsheet, a construction site, uh,
mm,
email, whatever it is.
mm,
The natural order of things are chaotic, and
mm,
we get to place them into order. And
mm,
I think it is a deeply sacred thing. And that is primarily where I think the 10x is coming from, is the Lord is blessing us. He's adding unto us
mm,
daily.
mm,
But that's the spiritual answer. The hard truth
mm,
is it's hard work.
mm,
So for the longest time, I was the first person in the office and the last person out. I would unlock the door and I would lock the door in the afternoon. I would work on myself in the evenings and I'll work on the business in the day.
mm.
So you asked, how do you 10x a business? You can only 10x a business if you 10x yourself. What I
Oh, that's a mic drop point right there.
what
Okay.
I what I mean by that is you can't lead a business that's bigger than what you can handle. It's like driving a race car without having a driver's license. Um,
Hmm.
you need to be equipped to run that business, and
Hmm.
nobody's going to equip you. You must equip yourself.
Right.
So the question is, are you hungry enough to grow so that you can lead other people, because in essence that's what business is. Yes,
Mm,
business is processes. Yes, business is um, finding a product that people is willing to pay for and delivering that product on scale. All of those things are true, but you need to lead people to be able to unite them behind a cause to drive the business forward. There are
mm,
very, very few businesses that can be successful without people. So there are a
mm,
select few, some IT business or some AI thing or something like that. But anything that's done on scale, you need people. Um, there's a guy that I really like. His name is Alex Hermosi, and he says there's a lot of people who think that they are entrepreneurs or business owners, but they are actually just self-employed. If uh,
mm,
if your business can't run without you,
mm,
then you are
mm,
self-employed. But if your
mm,
business can run without you, then you're a business owner. Um,
mm,
so you have to rise up people, and that's what I continually do. Is I am always on the lookout for who can I promote, who can I hire into a function that I'm fulfilling. So I'm not
mm.
threatened by people. I don't have an ego. I don't want to try and hog a position or hog the spotlight. I continually rise up people to free up my hands to do new things and continue
Mm.
building the business.
Okay. So if you were to go back to your statement about you can't 10x a business if you can't 10x yourself, and then I were to ask you, what sort of skill set, what are I'm sure there are quite a lot, but if you were to pick the most important ones in which you think are responsible for your ability to 10x the business, what are those?
I don't know. So skill sets um, are very difficult.
Capabilities,
Well,
competencies, whatever you want to name it. But
yeah, but
what sort, yeah.
those things are very difficult to quantify.
Mm,
So what I would rather quantify for you is the habits that will breed the skill sets that's required. In other words,
I like that.
if you can have habits that set you up for success, the success and the skill set will come. But if
Right.
you try and hunt the skill set, you might up being lopsided. So what I mean by
Right.
that is, let's say I feel financially overwhelmed and I don't understand financial numbers, and now I
Mm,
just go and hunt a financial skill set.
mm,
I might lack the people skills to continue lead the business. I might
mm,
not be able to identify the strategy to be able to generate the revenue for the numbers that I now do understand.
mm.
So, for me, a big part of my success sits in my habits.
Right.
So, one habit that I have is I read a book a month. So,
Right.
I do I do 12 books a year, and those and not non-fictional books, and those books vary from something like the let them theory on
Mm-hmm.
how to deal with things in your life. It might be the gap in the gain, how to remain positive and not be let down. It might be a more hard-coded skill set, how to understand financial statements. I read a cool book, Financial Statements for Dummies. Um, so by reading those books, you get hard skills, soft skills, and then you get exposed to where you feel your biggest gaps are. And then you supplement those gaps with um, hard skill intakes. So I think the biggest thing that I've done for my career is the habit of reading one book a month.
Okay. Okay. What other habits would you place on that list that you think are maybe often overlooked but have been kind of quite important for your
Physical
personal
ex-
development? Mm-hmm.
Physical exercise, without a shadow of a doubt.
Mm.
A healthy body holds a healthy mind. And again, I want to go far. I don't want to go fast. So for me, if I still want to be running a business when I'm 60, 70, 80 years old, I must actually be able to reach that age. And also, physical exercise helps to alleviate stress. It allows, it just allows me to be a better all around person, a better um, husband, better leader, better father. So physical exercise, I'll put right up there. Something
Mm-hmm.
else that is a good habit is time blocking. So, in
Mm-hmm.
other words, I block certain time slots for certain categories of work.
Mm-hmm.
Some people call it eating the frog. In other words, doing the hardest thing first. So the majority of my week is set up that I block, and I've actually done this for my entire business. We call it golden hour. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
it's 90 minutes, but the first 90 minutes, not the very first, but from 9 till 10:30, our entire business goes into what I call golden hour. So
Mm-hmm.
before you conclude today, you make a list of the most important task for you to get across the line tomorrow. So
Mm-hmm.
if you think of, I don't know if you've heard the domino theory, but a domino is capable of bumping over a domino that's 50% bigger than itself. So in
Mm-hmm.
other words, if I have a domino this big, it can bump over a domino that big, and then the dominoes get bigger. So the
Mm-hmm.
question my team asks itself at the end of every day is, what domino, if I push over that domino tomorrow morning, would make my work easier for the rest of the day? And then in
Right.
golden hour, nobody's allowed to speak. There's no incoming phone calls. Emails are off. No WhatsApps, no texts, no external communication, no distractions. And we have an open plan office. So some people feel it's not possible to enforce, but it is. And then for that hour and a half, you focus on that domino. You take your biggest task, the thing that you normally, because normally what happens is that thing gets put off. It's big, it's
Mm-hmm.
difficult, and I don't know where to
Mm-hmm.
start, and the office is
Mm-hmm.
noisy, and I don't want to. And then when you look again, that thing was on
Mm-hmm.
your list for a week, and you haven't done it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we time block and we do that
Mm-hmm.
domino first thing in the morning. And then from
Mm-hmm.
there, the day just flows.
Okay. Okay. I like that. I like that thinking about personal habits now that have come into the business. No. So if we take the same thinking around personal habits that help to 10x yourself and then help to 10x the business, what are some of the business habits as an organization that you have built up? The golden hour is one of them, but what are some of those that as a business you have built up that just have become part of what builds the competencies or the capabilities of KNID?
So two things spring to mind. We have what I call our town hall. So every
Mm-hmm.
Monday from 5 in the afternoon till 7 in the afternoon, we have a town hall meeting, all
Mm-hmm.
hands. So everybody that's in Gauteng meets together at the office. Everybody that's in the Western Cape meets together at that office. Everybody that is in KZN meets together at that office. And then we have bits and bobs of people who either can't make it in person, or they're stationed on the site, or the office isn't big enough, and they all join online. And for
Mm-hmm.
2 hours every week, we talk about what's happening in the business, what worked well. We celebrate birthdays, we share new hires, we talk about the business's numbers. I talk about the vision and the strategy. So we drive unity through our weekly town hall.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's a passage in scripture that says, "There where the brethren dwell in unity, there the Lord commands a blessing."
Mm-hmm.
So we have a weekly town hall that drives unity.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have various initiatives to make sure we have a healthy culture. So there's a saying that I love that says, culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So you can have the best strategy in the world. If your culture is unhealthy, the business won't thrive. So we put a lot of work into our culture. We have a
Mm,
running club and a social committee, and we send each other personal messages on our birthday, and we make sure that people find purpose and well-being in the business. We have a fractional counselor that people can meet with that the company pays for to speak about personal or marital problems. We drive culture quite heavily in the business
mm, mm,
to make sure that the
mm,
culture is healthy enough to sustain the bold strategy that we have.
mm, 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 mm. Right. Let's talk about people. You mentioned earlier on that you like attracting and retaining the right people to help with uh, scaling your business. How do you actually make that happen? The attraction and the keeping of the right people, um, without one, a high turnover rate, people coming in and leaving, but also just getting in the right people in the right seats. How do you do that?
There's a lot of literature on hiring. A lot of
Hmm.
people feel that you can get it right. A lot of people believe in psychometric tests. A lot of people
Hmm.
believe a lot of different things. I believe that we suck at hiring. We can't hire properly. And
Hmm.
when I say we, I mean businesses in general.
Generally. Yeah.
People because people are so complex. Like
Hmm.
um, it is very difficult to hire the right person for the right position because you don't know who the person is. You don't even really know the position that you're trying to fill. Like you think you
Hmm.
understand the job description, but you don't really. Like it's very nuanced and it's very fluent and very dynamic. So I have a
Hmm.
saying: we hire fast and we fire faster.
Hmm.
So we we fill a seat quickly, and if you don't fit into the culture or if you underperform, then we ask you politely to leave. That,
Hmm.
funnily enough, has created a culture of safety and security for the employees that's in the business. And
Hmm.
my business's priority is my employees, not
Hmm.
potential hires, not people standing on the outside looking in. So,
Hmm.
for potential candidates and for new hires, it's a stressful, um,
First 3 months for
daunting
sure.
thing to face. The
Mm,
saying, we hire
mm,
faster, we fire faster.
mm,
But once you're in, and you're
mm,
in, then you're part
mm,
of the I team, then you're part of the good culture.
mm,
So our staff
mm,
turnover is very, very, very low. Um,
mm,
so that's how we solve the problem: is we hire
mm,
fast, but we fire faster.
mm. I think the hiring fast may not be the problem. The firing fast might be where the challenges come through. How do you develop that muscle? How do you develop that capability of saying now you've seen that there's a problem? Because many entrepreneurs look at it and they keep the same people that they know are a problem for years and for some reason can't manage to get rid of them. How, give us some lessons around that.
So um, the first lesson is every single time, well, not every single time, but in the beginning, every single time when I made a decision to let somebody go,
Mm-hmm.
I always felt I should have done this a long time ago. It's always the
Sure.
feeling that I have never or very rarely felt like, jeepers, I think I should have given that person a better or a longer chance. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, regret is a good teacher.
Mm-hmm.
But to clarify, it's not like we fire people. We don't chase them away um, like useless. We just have honest and frank conversations. And 99% of the time, when you as an employer feel somebody isn't a good fit, they
Mm-hmm.
also feel that they are not a good fit. So what
Mm-hmm.
we do is we give generous severance packages.
Mm.
So we've paid 6 months severance package to employees that underperform or that didn't make the cut, to afford them the time to find something new and to make sure that they leave with dignity. And I know there's business owners listening to this podcast now that says, Christoph, but I can't afford to give 6 months um, severance package for somebody to make sure that they leave with dignity or that they don't take me to the CCMA or whatever.
Mm. Mm.
Um, I would much rather put them on a performance plan and track their performance and then do
Mm.
KPIs. And then if they don't
Mm.
make it, then I'll let them go without a severance
Mm.
package.
Mm.
If you
Mm.
go run the math and if you add all of the
Mm.
time spent on a performance appraisal program, your
Mm.
HR, your time, the person's time, the direct
Mm.
reports time, the meetings that you sit,
Mm.
the reports that you draft, if you
Mm.
tally all of that time, you very, very quickly get to a 6 months
Mm.
salary severance package that you pay.
Mm. Mm. Wow. So honest conversations.
Honest conversations.
Mm. 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 All right. So let's talk about, the leadership bottleneck, because many leaders become the bottleneck themselves. How do you empower your team to take ownership of their work and kind of uh, leave you with what you consider the most important things to do?
By not stepping in and being the hero,
Yeah, that's
I think
powerful.
I think a lot of leaders have this subconscious need to be wanted or to be needed. So as
Mm,
soon as something looks like it's wrong, we step in and we come and fix the situation.
mm,
So I attended a business growth seminar, and the guy
mm,
told me, focus on the main thing and let all other fires burn.
hmm,
And that's what I do. My main thing is strategy. Where's the business going? Is our culture healthy? Are we getting
mm,
our clients?
mm,
And the rest of the fires, I let them burn. And I promise you,
mm,
my business hasn't burned to the ground. So your
mm,
team learns very quickly to take ownership um, of their problems if they know that I'm not going to step in and rescue them.
mm, mm,
So I empower, I
mm,
teach. In other words,
mm,
this is what I want you to do. This is your department. I
mm,
define it very clearly. Then
mm,
I empower.
mm,
What is it that you need to execute
mm,
on this
mm,
instruction? And
mm,
after I've taught and I empowered, I get out of the way.
mm.
We can't teach, empower, and then stick around.
Oh,
Then the, then the
that is
shadow
powerful.
that we then cast um, leaves the people feeling immobilized.
We can't teach, empower, and then stick around. My goodness, I love that. Um, yeah, even Jesus had to leave. That's wonderful. Um, there's an emotional side to this. When I work with entrepreneurs, I can almost sense that there's the part you talked about where we want to feel needed. The question is for the founder, if they start becoming better than me, and now I find that I have nothing to do. What will I do with my life? I don't sense them asking me this question, but I see that that is part of why they keep getting involved in the small things. How did you deal with that? And how do you deal with that?
By reminding myself of my purpose and my skill set, and
Hmm.
knowing that there will always be something for me to do. So, my skill set and my purpose is to create a business where people can come and find value and purpose and dignity. And that's what I do. And
Hmm.
if somebody else does something better than me, that's actually like something that I am very passionate about. I want to hire people that's smarter and better than me.
Hmm.
Um, and to not feel like it's a threat to me. It's actually a
Mm,
compliment. If I can find somebody smarter than me that can do it better than me, good
mm,
for the business.
mm, mm, mm. I think I've heard you say you want to work yourself out of your business,
I want to work myself out of a job. Many
out of a
founders have
job.
this fallacy that they
Mm,
believe that they are a unicorn and that nobody else can do what they do. They
mm,
are uniquely positioned to be able to do what they do and they are irreplaceable.
mm,
So, firstly, I think that's a lie. I don't think we are unicorns. I don't think we are as important and clever as what we make ourselves out to be. But let's pretend for a moment we are unicorns. And there are no other unicorns out there in the world. If that is true, it's still not a problem for me because a unicorn
mm,
is just a horse that I paint white with a plastic horn that I put on it, some wings, and I can even go extra and add some glitter. So if
mm,
I want a unicorn, I just break it up into its various parts. I buy a horse, I paint it white, I buy the horn, I put it on the horse, I hire somebody to throw glitter, and poof, the unicorn is replaced. I can step away. Somebody else is doing it. So if you fall in this trap to think that you are irreplaceable, just don't look at the holistic package that you bring to the business, break it up into bite sized pieces, and then you staff according to the bite sized pieces.
Ah, the very things that make you a unicorn can be subdivided, and you start
Yes.
looking for people that are great at the subdivided
Yes.
things, and then you
You,
work
you
yourself
buy the
out of
best
the business.
horse,
Yeah.
nicest white paint, the best
Mm-hmm.
horn, and then you just take
Mm-hmm.
all of these things and you put them together.
I get you. I get you. Um, Before we go to the last part, I just want to ask, biggest mistakes that you think you've made through your entrepreneurship journey and some of the lessons, hard lessons you've learned that you would want other entrepreneurs to know.
Thinking I'm more important than I am, I
Hmm.
think is a big mistake. Uh, in other words, not realizing that somebody else can do what I do better.
Hmm.
Then not letting go of staff fast enough. In other words, keeping people in seats longer than what I was supposed
Then,
to is, I think, a big mistake
hmm.
that I've made.
Hmm.
Um, Not watching my cash close enough. In other words, burning through my cash runway in the attempt
Hmm.
of scaling. So, in other words,
Hmm.
scaling at the speed that what my cash can handle. I think those are
Hmm.
the biggest mistakes that I can think of now.
Okay. Okay. So, your personal life. You are a parent, you are a person of faith. Um, how does family, faith, hobbies, and all the things, other things that you do come in to this world of an entrepreneur? How do they fit in, and how do they inform how you do business?
Great question. Great question. I love it. Um, a lot of people chase this fallacy called work life balance. I don't
Hmm.
know if you've heard the term
Yeah.
work life balance. I hate that term, and I'll tell you why. Work life balance implies if I get everything just right, then everything would be in perfect balance. But that implies, even if you can reach that point, I don't think you can reach it, but let's pretend that you can.
Right.
Now I have everything balanced my work,
Right.
my kids, my wife, my
Hmm.
fitness, my
Hmm.
relationship with my parent. Like everything is in balance.
Hmm.
Now my kid is sick. Work goes through a cash flow issue. We have a couple of staff members that resigned and I have to put in more hours.
Hmm.
Immediately the balance is thrown. So my satisfaction and my state of mind is dependent on external factors.
Mm,
And I tell my wife all the time, we happen to life, we cannot allow life to happen to us. We're not victims, we're driving, we're uh, in the driver's seat.
mm,
So what I like more than work-life balance is a word called harmony. So if you take a jet engine, it's not balanced, but it's tuned until the point of harmony.
mm,
Is the ratio of the fuel and the wind and the turbine spinning, is
mm,
all of that in harmony? Does it hum just right? And then the plane takes off.
mm,
So I believe I must be in harmony, and then my jet engine will take off. So how does harmony look practically? I just had a very tough week at work. My wife
mm,
barely saw me, my kids barely saw me, but I knew because I communicated to them, this is a tough week, but the weekend is coming and then I'll make it up to you. So,
mm.
relationships, I view it like a credit card. All of us have a credit card, and there's nothing wrong using your credit card. But if you stay in debt, the interest will kill you. But
Yeah.
if you use your credit card responsibly, it actually increases your credit score and you can get more credit. So, in
Mm,
other words, I'm in debt with my family this week. I need to get out of debt. So,
mm,
I need to reinvest to make sure we stay in harmony. Was this
mm,
week balanced? Not at all. I worked till 11, 12 at night, got up at 4, carried on working. Um, so, there was zero balance, but I'm in harmony.
mm,
So that's how I fit everything. Then just the final thing on that, you asked how does all of these different things fit together. I live my life from a place of I am all of these things at once. In other words, as I'm talking to you now, I'm not
mm,
your podcast guest
mm,
primarily.
mm,
I am a father, I am a
mm,
business owner, I am a
mm,
husband, I
mm,
am all of these things simultaneously. It's not that I
mm,
change as I go from one to the other to the other. Um,
mm,
and that helps me to remain grounded and to understand that it is normal for me to um, give there and take here, and then take back
mm,
and give there. It is a normal cycle of life.
mm, mm, mm. Wow. All right. So if you were to um look 20, 30 years from now, and you want to be able to look back, what would it mean for you to say you truly built something on a grand scale?
I don't know about 20 to 30 years. We have a 7-year horizon plan.
Right, right.
That means we want to go from our current 5% market share to 20% market share. So
Mm-hmm,
we must we must times the business by 4 in the next, call it 6 years, because we're 1 year into the 7-year plan already.
mm-hmm,
Which means we'll go from 100 employees to there's going to be some operational efficiency. So let's say to 300 employees in the next
mm-hmm,
6 years.
mm-hmm,
Um, but to be honest, your question is what will I have to have done in 30 years from now to look back and feel that I've built something on a grand scale?
mm-hmm,
Um, to be honest, I'm fortunate that I feel I have built something on a grand scale. So
right.
I'm continuing to build something.
Sure.
Uh, but we have 100 staff members that
Mm-hmm,
find purpose, comfort, and joy in their work, and for me, that's grand. Uh,
mm-hmm,
I would love to give it for 1,000 employees, but
mm-hmm,
I'm happy with 100.
うん、うん、うん。 Christoph, thank you very much for coming to On a Grand Scale podcast. It was lovely to learn from you and to hear your journey of how you are leading KaneMed, to hear the ups and downs, and to get these mic drop nuggets that came throughout this. So thank you very much for that. And to our followers and listeners, this is indeed On a Grand Scale podcast where you get to learn everything that has to do with scaling your business. And so please make sure that you subscribe to the channel wherever you are subscribing from and ensure that you are there for the next one because this is how we do it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. You must have a fantastic day.